The government of Nigeria and UN Women recently launched the Generation Equality Campaign in Nigeria. UN Women representative to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Comfort Lamptey, introducing the campaign, said the Generation Equality Campaign is rooted in a journey that began 25 years ago in Beijing, China, when 189 countries gathered to adopt what is considered the most ambitious blueprint for women's empowerment and gender equality to date. The Beijing Declaration, is said, is a platform for action with its 12 critical areas of concern. In her comments, and I quote, 25 years later, we have a chance to take stock of progress and also to chart a new path forward. It is in doing so that we launched the Generation Equality Campaign. Also speaking, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, said, Generation Equality is about older and younger generations learning from each other, but critically, it is for us, the older generation, to hand the baton over to the young people to carry on our mutual vision for a more prosperous and gender equal Nigeria. On the program, we will be looking at Choose to Challenge growing gender disparity and takeaways and prospects for action coming on the heels of the 2021 Women's Leadership Dialogue in Nigeria. If time allows, we'll attempt to address other matters. My guest is the UN Women Country Representative to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Comfort Lamptey. The program continues just after this time out. Stay with us. It's good to have you once again on the program.
Thank you so much for having me back.
The last time we had the program, we looked at the global governance challenge posed by COVID-19. Thank God we are here once again. It's nice seeing
Indeed.
you still holding forth as the country rep of UN Women to Nigeria and ECOWAS. But quickly, a couple of things happened lately, and a wonderful piece came from the UN Women, and it has to do with security of schools. Nigeria is a signatory to the Safe School Declaration activated by the UN, and one beautiful piece, it says schools are and must remain places of safety and security where children can learn and grow in peace. Girls and young women must be able to go to school without fear of violence and unjust treatment. The girls and boys who are at risk must be protected, including protecting their rights to security, life, and education. UN Women stands with the parents and families of the abducted children and with the Nigerian people. What activated this?
So this quote was actually the press release from our executive director, who set this out in response to the kidnapping of girls. I believe it was 279 girls in Zamfara state about 2 or 3 weeks back. And of course, you recall when the girls were also kidnapped in Chibok, I think UN Women was also very swift to respond. The issue of the girl child and girl child education is really critical. It was one of the critical areas of concern from Beijing and has been since. And we have been making some progress in terms of getting more girls in school, certainly at the primary level. But we also know that we need to do more. Of course, 2/3 of the children out of school in Nigeria happen to be girls. Over 10 million children out of school in Nigeria right now. We had a situation over the last year of COVID-19, which also threatened the education of both boys and girls, but particularly girls, where we had lots of reports of some parents who, because of the lockdowns and the closure of schools, were actually considering or actually actively took girls out of school for early marriage and so on. So there's been a lot of advocacy around that as well, about the need to ensure that girls can go to school. So in an environment where you have the majority of people out of school being young girls, in an environment where you've had a pandemic that has exacerbated the risks for girls being out of school, and then you now have this insecurity with the kidnapping of girls, starting from Chibok in 2015 right up until today. So it was a need to raise an alarm about the need for us to make sure that we actually keep girls in school and make schools a safe place for girls. Of course, even in normal times, girls face particular challenges in school. Girls face risks related to sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, etc. Sometimes the people who are there to protect them, teachers, are those who are harassing them. So there are all these factors, but as a parent, you send your child to school because you know that the school environment is a safe environment. You're going to work, or even if you're a home worker, you know that you've sent your child to a place where they're going to better themselves, they're going to be safe and protected.
Are you aware that the NTA has a campaign, Stand Against Rape and Rapists? Start.
That's great. That's great.
So how does the UN Women plan to key into this?
Well, we have since 2019, not just UN Women, but UN Women and some of the other UN agencies been supporting an initiative together with the European Union Spotlight Initiative, which is the biggest global investment to address issues of gender-based violence. And the Spotlight Initiative focuses not just on issues of rape, domestic violence, early marriage, harmful traditional practices, basically the whole range of different kinds of violence which women and girls face. And it's been implemented in 6 states, but much of the advocacy that it's impacting nationally in terms of the advocacy. So certainly, I think the more partners that we can bring on board and have a coalition, I think the better it will be. And certainly we've seen in the last year with the lockdowns, of course, we saw how gender-based violence cases increased across the country, and so these sorts of campaigns are really important, and we'll definitely look at how we can join forces. Okay,
that leads me to my concern today, which is choose to challenge. We heard so much of it during the Women's International Week, and the conversation goes on. Now let's say
it's International Women's Month, so we're still working on the issues.
Now that we are still here, choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge gender inequalities.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a call to action. International Women's Day, of course, we mark it as International Women's Month now in Nigeria, but it really is it's both celebrating the small achievements of women, big achievements as well, but it is also a period to reflect on and take action. It's a call to action. So yes, we do mark and we celebrate International Women's Day, but we also stand up to lend our voices to the need to address a lot of the persistent inequalities that are holding women back. So indeed, the Choose to Challenge motto is about where are the barriers? What are the barriers that are holding women back, and in a sense holding our countries and the development agenda itself back, and how do we challenge them, whether they range from violence against women. All of these things have root causes, but I do believe that a lot of them are rooted in...
And that's the concern now. Most times we ask, how do you cope now with the avalanche of issues on ground, besides the 12 critical areas of concern post-Beijing 25 years on? Now, given the multiplicity of issues and interests by African countries, ECOWAS, you are UN country rep to Nigeria and ECOWAS, how are you networking to ensure that there is a synergy created so that at the end of the day we have a common front of women in Africa, a common front of women in West Africa?
Well, of course, we support one of the key areas we support is actually having more women in leadership. As you said, there are a lot of issues, but where at the decision making on issues that affect women, you have a dearth of women, it's a problem. So one of the first things we need to do is also ensure that we have more women in leadership who are experienced in many of these challenges that are holding us back, and who can also contribute to the decision making that will make the space a better one for all of us. And so this year, in fact, of course, every year we have a global forum where we bring all women together in New York, the Commission on the Status of Women. And the role of that's convening over 2 weeks, where governments come and say, what is it that we're doing? The process starts from the country levels, country dialogues, to regional dialogues at the Africa Union level, and then to the global convening in New York, where we each region, so the Africa region this year on the Commission on Status has a position paper around the thematic topic of women's participation in public life. But that global forum is where we all come together and re-strategize and reflect and learn from each other and set new targets and new priorities to address. So it's a collective effort, and we really take these global fora very seriously, because those are the spaces that women from across the different areas of life can come together and reflect on progress, but also look at setting a new agenda. And as I said, this year the theme is women's participation in public life, which very much resonates for us in Nigeria. I'm sure you'd agree, because we are in a situation where in Africa, Nigeria, it has the lowest representation of women in elected life. So it's a crisis. I believe it's a crisis, and many women are seeing it as a national crisis. And we need to be able to overturn this image of Nigeria, because Nigeria is leading on so many other fronts. Why is it that in the context of decision making, we have so few women in Nigeria, such that we are even at the bottom of the scale?
Could it be because they are not frontal, or they are just laid back?
Oh no! I mean, I believe that Nigerian women and they are expressing leadership across the continent and the world. You know, there are so many women in Africa and in the world who see the expression of women's leadership. So it's not a question of being frontal. We've just had a Nigerian...
frontal, yet not violent.
Well, it's not about... I don't know where the violence comes in, but no, it's about being able to recognize, I believe, the resources that exist in this country, that in order for Nigeria to achieve its optimal development potential, it has to harness all the resources.
Let me hold you there. When we return after the break, we'll take a look at what are those critical areas of concern. There are 12 in number. Have we gone even half of it in terms of achievements within the platform of women across the world? Stay with us. Okay, now before we went on break, we touched on what was the focus of the 2021 Women's Leadership Dialogue in Nigeria. Now, like we said, the last time we were on this program, we tried to x-ray the 12 critical areas of concern. We are still within the space of post-Beijing conference, 25 years after. Maybe this is 26th year, right?
Yes.
Now, inclusion of women in decision making. It could be one thing, bringing women to leadership positions in the world, but are they involved in decision making?
Okay, so now...
Quite dicey there, right?
Well, are women involved in decision making? Yes, they are, but they could be involved even better. I mean, look at the context again. We can use just the context in Nigeria. Of course, women are involved. If you start in the home front, women are involved in decision making on the home front. You go into the public spaces, they are. I mean, there's one area where Nigeria is actually doing much better globally in terms of women's involvement in decision making than in the public space, and that's in the private sector. because the global average of women on private sector company boards, it's about 17%. But Nigeria's average is higher than the global average. Nigeria has about 20% of women, so 1 in 5. And so that's quite impressive, although there's still a way to go. And it raises the question, it's not just because we don't have women who can play a decision-making role. They're there, and they're in the private sector. It's evident. How do we ensure that in the public sector as well, in elected office, we see the same? And I think when I have talked to women in the private sector, they always speak about the political will and the commitment that was taken to ensure that at least a minimum 30% of women should be represented. They set a target, and different companies work towards that. I think we need to ensure that we also implement the minimum 35% representation that exists in the Nigerian gender policy. We have a constitutional review process underway right now as we speak to amend the constitution. I think this is a golden opportunity to ensure, and this issue also came up repeatedly in the leadership dialogue you were speaking about last week, that this is a golden opportunity for us to enshrine in the Constitution the affirmative action principles that will guarantee a minimum representation of women in political life. We know that countries around the world that have made progress in terms of women's representation, oftentimes it has been because they actually legislated it. So I believe that we do have to legislate this in Nigeria. The UN Secretary General last week, when he issued a statement on International Women's Day, cited that, globally, women represent about 25% of parliament. And he says, if we're going to go at this rate in order to achieve equality, it will take us decades. But look at us in Nigeria. We are not at the 25%. We are at 4.4%. So how many centuries would it take us? We need to have the legislation. And I think that's a global good practice that we have seen. And so those are some of the initiatives that at least that we are supporting, we're advocating for, and I believe the constitutional review process offers a great opportunity to do that.
Okay, just like they will say, the success of an election at any level is the capacity and the willingness of the electorate to participate in the election. You could deploy all the materials, get all the umpires involved. When the electorate refuses to turn up, would that be an election? That's the challenge. Now, that takes me to this. In talking about generational equality, you said 25 years later, I'm quoting you now, we have a chance to take stock of progress and also chart a new path forward. It is in doing so that we launch the Generation Equality Campaign. And if it is handing over the baton, what is the UN Women doing? Let's say Nigeria, ECOWAS, and maybe globally, to conscientize the younger generation you're planning to hand over the baton to maybe the kind of value mindset reorientation, to walk them to understand what you're looking for. Because it's one thing, you want to hand over the baton, are they willing? Do they understand the baton they want to get? Where will they take off from? And because this thing is all evolving, it has no destination. So how do you intend to handle this? It looks quite complex.
Well, start by saying that actually we have no choice. We have a very youthful population, even if we, and the globally, the Generation Equality Campaign is charting a new path. It's here in Nigeria we launched it, but even last year we also invested in a program of intergenerational mentorship, where we actually brought women who had been to Beijing, and from Nigeria there were dozens of women who went to Beijing. So to mark 25 years, we brought 25 women who had gone to Beijing. with 25 young women across different spaces. And we did a 6-month structured intergenerational mentorship for this group. And it was wonderful to see the transformation, if you like, of some of these young women, because they were actually learning. And it's really important, even whilst we support the leadership role of young women, we also recognize the importance of intergenerational exchange. Of course, it goes both ways. So the older women generation were also learning from the younger women. But we believe that intergenerational dialogue is key. And at the end of that process, we said, you know what, we did this experiment, this pilot with you as 25 women. We need to grow this community to 25 million young women who are committed and who are going to be champions of this agenda going forward. So it's still a work in progress. I mean, globally, there's going to be a forum in Mexico and then later on in Paris that UN Women is organizing, bringing young people and women across the world. We have people from Nigeria who will be participating. But certainly for us going forward in everything, every area of our programming and activities, we're stressing the leadership role of young people and the importance of intergenerational mentorship. I often say to women who are established in their fields when I meet with them, who are the young women who are with you, who are learning from you? It has to become part of our work cultural practice to be able to ensure that younger women are given the space, that they are heard. I mean, we had a conversation last week during the International Women's Day, and the young women said, we're talking, but we're not being heard. We have something to say. We're not an add-on. We're not an appendage to a conversation. We are part of the conversation. We need to be heard. And I think that's important. And we've seen demonstration of leadership by young women in Nigeria, which has been phenomenal, even just in the last year with different processes. So indeed, we'll continue to build on that and harness that in our programming, in our advocacy, and how we also showcase the good work that young women are doing, whether in technology, in the arts, in politics, and so on. I think there's a great deal of leadership that's being expressed by young people.
There's a global challenge, a West African challenge, and indeed a Nigerian challenge, even within the UN Women. Advocacies, timelines, deliverables. Are you worried?
About the time?
Because most times that's the problem. We want to advocate, but we don't tinker towards the timelines. And at the end, we are caught up with.
Well, I just mentioned to you a timeline that we have staring us in the face, right? We have the 2030 agenda. That's a global agenda. That's a race to the end.
That's what. Are you worried?
Absolutely, but I don't think it's impossible if we can put in place the things that need to be done. One of which is making sure we have women at the center of all of these efforts, because when we harness the potential and the resources of women, I believe we can reach those targets much quicker and faster than if we don't. So we need to develop where we have to develop and harness where we have to harness the capacities of women to meet our target of the 2030 agenda.
Comfort Lamptey, it was nice having you on Diplomatic Ties again.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
That's it on the program. We looked at Choose to Challenge Generation Inequality, and my guest, as you know, is the UN Women Country Representative to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Comfort Lamptey. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.